You are in for an interesting ride.
Hi folks, and welcome to another ETN interview. In this one, we're going to be speaking to Reinerio Hernandez, also known as Rey Hernandez. And Rey wrote a book in collaboration with many others, linked with FREE, which is the Foundation for Research into Extraordinary Extraterrestrial Encounters. And I interviewed Rey back at the MASH Files 2014, and I thought it would be great to catch up with Rey and find out what the latest is. And in the meantime, what I wanted to do was to invite someone else to come and co-host with me and see how that worked out. You may or may not remember that I interviewed 2022 D Trainer. The gentleman was talking to me about doing some podcasts, and I thought, do you know what? It might be quite fun to see how we get on as a co-hosting scenario. Howard Haynes is joining me with Rey Hernandez, and I'm delighted to welcome him. Before we got to Rey was to do a bit of a reflective look at his experiences, Howard Haynes, D Trainer, to see how far he's come in the couple of years and if there's been any big changes. And also, I am a regression therapist, which kind of also falls within the remit of quantum healing because it doesn't always stay with a moment. It often, the work I do goes to the point of issue. So I worked with Howard, and I just thought it would be quite interesting for people to hear his experience. So bear with us. We are set to go. This is Howard Haynes and a reflective look at his UFO encounter experiences. Enjoy. Initially, he was a little bit unsure about putting his face out there with his experiences, which was only in 2022. And he is doing podcasts himself. And now how things have been in the interim 2 years.
Firstly, thanks very much for having me on, or should I say having me back. Yeah, it's been an interesting couple of years. I've developed some courage since we last spoke. So at least as you say, you're seeing me in the flesh rather than just my chin from the last, podcast. Yeah, the ETs have been coming since. You know, it's still fairly regular.
Has there been any change in the way they come around or behave with you?
I mean, it's all been so different. You know, sometimes it's orbs, sometimes it's lights, sometimes they're flashing, sometimes they're streaking across the sky, sometimes you can actually see the craft themselves. I told you about the time I was coming back from Limerick and the triangular craft was just stopped over the overpass. You know, it's just lots of different things. They've helped me on occasion. I don't know, did I mention that the last time?
Remind me.
So there's been several times where, you know, they've helped me when I've asked for it. You know, now it can't be, we'll get down to the shop, we couldn't be asked, you know, because I'm sure I'd quite quickly get told where to go, you know. But if it's a genuine need, last March, my partner has a child with her ex, and the ex, we'll just say, isn't a very nice person. We leave it at that. I was expecting to have an altercation with him. She doesn't want to be in the same room as him, basically, or see him at all. So her family normally takes their son off him and gives the son to him. You know, she has no interaction with him at all. She said to me, would you mind staying over Wednesday night, you know, and taking our son off him in the morning? I said, you know, that's fine. Now, I hate violence, and this guy would draw violence out of a stone. He's just a really particularly nasty guy. It's not so much getting into a scrap with him, but it's, you know, what you do to the person and have to live with it afterwards. That's what I was more afraid of, and I was extremely stressed about. I was pretty sure there was going to be an altercation. So Wednesday evening, before I left to drive to her house, she was living about an hour away, I did a little meditation, and I just said, lads, is there any way you can get me through this without violence? And I walked out of the house 8:25, and I didn't even have to look up. I knew they were there. And when I looked up, there was a craft flying over the house. And I said, do you mind if I record you? And I just got out the phone and I did a recording. You know, I suppose it's an orb, you know, but it's really sparkly and it seems to be rotating. And as soon as I looked up and saw it, all the stress just left me. Now, I'm pretty sure, Joanna, you've dealt with your fair share of stress. Stress doesn't just leave you. It doesn't just drop off you. I mean, even if you were to take a couple of tablets, it takes a few hours for them to kick in. And as soon as I looked up, it just, I was, oh my God, thank you so much. you know. I knew everything was going to be okay. As I was driving, it was on my right shoulder, flashing the whole way. You know, I could see I was looking out the window. Now, if it was a plane flashing, you know, it would go by. You know, it would probably be out of eyesight within a minute or so. You know, this thing stayed with me for 10 minutes the whole way, just flashing, and eventually went into some cloud and was gone. And I got to Claremorris, and he was there again, and he was just pulsing in the sky. The next morning, I got up 7 o'clock, and he was due to drop me off at 7:30. I was sitting on the bed meditating, trying to stay as calm as I could. And the next thing, the knock came on the door, and I got up and I slowly walked to the door. And just as I opened up the door, I could hear the wheels spinning of the car going up the gate. Gone. And when I opened up the door, there was the child standing in front of me. So he basically dumped the child and ran.
Wow.
Right? I don't believe in coincidences, but I got what I got. There was no altercation. So, as you know, their science is conscious based. So whatever little push they may have given him psychologically, he got in the car, he got out the gate, and he burnt about 4 inches of rubber doing so. They've helped me when I've asked if the need has been genuine.
Have the sightings got more frequent?
I would say maybe a bit less frequent now because I'm so used to it. You know, whereas before I just couldn't believe it was happening. You know, and I think they were just giving me more and more and more just until they convinced me. And I think once they knew I was convinced. Now it's every now and again, you know, once a week, once a fortnight, you know, it's not, whereas it was every day, or sometimes you'd be out the back hovering there for hours. It was all the time. So I don't, maybe the right phrase is I don't need them as much anymore, but they're around all the time. You know, I mean, my left ear rings when they're around. That still happens. Sometimes they wake me up at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. Now, when I say wake me up, I don't get a, you know, wake up, you know, oh, I'm awake, you know. Whereas normally in the morning, if I wake up, it takes me a half an hour to get out of the bed. I have to peel one eye open, I have to peel the other eye open, I have to stretch, you know, and it takes me a half an hour to get out of the bed between 3 and 4. Bing, I'm wide awake. And I say, all right, okay, they're outside. And when I go outside, there's usually something flying over the house or, you know.
Get any sort of telepathic messages or?
You know, it's funny. Sometimes I hear myself talking in my head, like I've asked myself about something, and the next thing I'll answer myself in my own voice. But I don't think it's me answering because I'm saying something I wouldn't normally say, or I'm phrasing it a different way. And I don't think it's me talking. It's strange. And I catch myself like, you know, blah, blah, blah. Did I just say that? You know, and it's when you catch yourself, it's like...
You know, sort of in 2022, when we did that interview, you weren't sure about associating your identity with what you were saying. And now you've got a lot bolder. Are you just feeling more confident in yourself?
There's a few reasons, Joanna, to be honest. The first reason, yeah, I'm a little bit braver. You know, it's out there more. It's in the Congress. You know, more people are talking about it. You know, you can say it to people without feeling, you know, am I gonna get jail? Are they gonna call the men in white coats? You know, you don't feel like a leper. You know, now there's an odd people, you know, an odd person they still can look at you strange, but I think most people are at the very least aware now, whereas before, you know, they weren't. It's out there now, it's in the media. It's the New York Times, you know, publishing that in 2017 was, you know, the Tic Tac and all that. That was a big step forward. And now you know, they're having congressional hearings over it. It's everywhere. Well, I mean, I feel I probably should be doing something with this. And as you can kind of see by the background, I've started my own podcast, Howard's UFO Chronicles. And forgive the name, I just couldn't think of a better one. The main reason I'm doing it is I feel that I should be sharing my experiences because at least if I can give people a bit of confidence that, you know, the ETs are, you know, their presence here is a good thing. It's a positive thing. You know, very peaceful. It might give them a bit of confidence not to be afraid of it. You know, I would imagine that full disclosure will come pretty soon, probably within the next 12 to 24 months. I imagine everyone on the planet will know we're not alone. So if we're going to help even one person, you know, then it will have been worthwhile. I feel I should do something with it at this stage. Otherwise, why am I getting all these visits?
Quite, exactly. I was just going to ask if there'd been any more indication of what's going on with that. Why you and why not, of course, but...
I don't. Maybe part of me needed them. You know, they came into a time in my life when I really did need them. My ex was left with the kids and in a really bad place, and with the COVID lockdown and all that kind of stuff.
Well, that's wonderful. So let's just have a little look at what you are wanting to do. We'll do our co-hosting with Rey Hernandez. You're going to be doing podcasts with your sky watching. your CE5s.
It's to do with the visits. A lot of it is going to be, about my own personal experiences, and I'm going to bring on some friends who've experienced them with me. Maybe if I get any kind of reaction, see maybe what the audience wants, maybe answer questions. I'll obviously put up a lot of my own videos and photos. I'm hoping they'll find those interesting. I've two of my friends set up to come on in the next week, or episodes recorded before I actually publish, and then away we go.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping with the next week or two to kick
great.
off.
That's great. Really good for you. So, Howard, I want to know a little bit about your background with the animals, because I'm a dogaholic and I know you are a dog trainer, which is a bit of the reason why I named your last video, which you didn't show your face in, as D trainer.
Yes, very happy.
Yes, and also on the nutritional side, because I think people would find that quite interesting.
I've done every job you can think of, from butcher, baker, not a candlestick maker, but I mean everything in between. Running multinationals, a labour, you name it, I've done it. And I hated them all. So eventually just wanted to do something I wanted to do. And I always had a natural ability with animals, especially dogs. I'd always been well able to train dogs. So I got into it professionally. And I started down the route of dog training. And then I felt that there was a need for a dog daycare centre in Ireland. This is going back to 15, 16 years ago. There was no daycare centres in the west of Ireland. So I opened up a daycare centre, and I board them from my home, home from home boarding service. So it's a very unique niche kind of service. But just to kind of give an all under one roof service, I did a diploma in canine nutrition, which took a few years, and it was one of the more difficult things I've done. There was a lot in it. As far as I'm aware, I think I'm the only canine nutritionist certified in Ireland, because while vets give good canine nutritional advice, they're not actually nutritionists. Their new canine nutritional course is actually very short. Usually they seem to specialise more in bovine and equine. Their canine course is quite short. I've asked a few vets that. So mine was quite extensive. I was a dog trainer professionally, but then I wanted to get into behaviour. So I'm one of only 3 canine behaviourists in the country. The canine behaviour is really where I shine. I don't like throwing bouquets at myself, but I would dare say I'm one of the top behaviourists anywhere. Just have this natural ability with them. And that's just something you can't teach. Dealing with, like basic obedience, teaching your dog to sit, to train them to become responsive to you. Your typical dog training stuff, okay? Whereas behaviour is dealing with, I suppose it's canine psychology. So I'd be dealing with dogs who are reactive, fearful, who may suffer aggression or excessive behavioural issues like excessive bite and bark and chew and stuff like that, that are coming from one or several places that you need to try and, turn around. I'm very busy with that. I can't keep up with it, to be honest. Usually the people are part of the problem. So trying to get them on board, to trying to get them to a place where they can gel with the dog and become part of the fix as opposed to the problem. It's probably the most challenging bit, And quite often, if a dog is aggressive or reactive or fearful, a lot of the time the bond between the dog and the owner is broken down. So I have to try and fix the owner first, then fix the bond back between the owner and the dog, and then work on the dog. Cesar Milan would be a fully aversive trainer. So he's very much hands-on. I'm hands-off. If he could pull back his level of aggression, he'd be probably a top-class behaviourist, but I don't agree with his methods. He wouldn't be what I would call an animal lover. He talks the talk. I've seen videos of how he really trains the dogs, and, I'll give you one quick example. I had a little Bichon not that long ago that was aggressive, which is rare. You don't normally get aggressive Bichons. And the first thing the dog did, I bent down and said hello, and the first thing he did was launch at my face. And I grabbed him midair. And the first question I asked the lady was, well, where does the dog sleep? And you always get the kind of the guilt, you always get that reaction. And, well, he sleeps up in the bed with me on my pillow, and my husband sleeps in the other room. And I get that regularly, And my first question to her was, well, how fond are you of your husband? Because I can guarantee he's got 1 foot out the door. I'll give you 6 months. So by the time I fixed the dog, and then she emailed me about 3 weeks later and said, you were right. She said, my husband was about to leave me. I said, I told you, often you have to fix the person before you fix the dog.
Very interesting indeed. Well, thanks for sharing that. But talking about fixing people, part of the things I do, I don't know about fixing, that's not really the word I would use, but helping people find freedom from some trigger issues and also to uncover things. And my regression work over the years has definitely taken me there and expanded and developed quite a lot, quite a distance from my original training, if you like. It's all incorporated, but because I've expanded, so has my work. And so while something may be regression orientated to start with, I will allow it to follow where the issue or the trigger may be. And if I'm working one-to-one in the same room with a person, I will also be able to sense with my hand over the body where the issues are, because often when things are ready to come to the surface to be cleared or healed, there's often a blockage to that subconscious or other issue coming in, which creates a bit of a smokescreen. I can always sense it, feel it and know it, often before the person, because they won't necessarily know they're sabotaging themselves is perhaps a bit too strong a phrase, but it's down that avenue. Like with the dogs and their behavior, so many layers to what we experience. And of course, a lot of it does go into past life and material that we've experienced and brought on that's either concreted itself into part of our nature or not.
I don't know if you just saw that, but an orb is after
I
flying
did.
past.
Actually, I was going to mention it, but as I was midstream, and this happened actually when I did the Prague talk, that it happened twice in quick succession. And it sometimes happens when I'm doing the intro. Very interesting. Yeah, you spotted it. And
Yeah.
sometimes I've actually seen it with my physical eye. This time I did see it pass me on the screen because I'm looking at the screen. So we did 2 or 3 sessions. I know I've already asked you previously, you don't mind sharing the reason that you thought it might be a useful system. Then what we'll do is play that weird, strange sound and ending of the session, which you can mention.
Well, first of all, I just want to say to anybody who's thinking about having regression, you should go to Joanna. She's absolutely amazing. I've been regressed by 2 people. I won't mention the other guy's name, but he was next to useless. Do you want me to talk about that?
I think what might be interesting for people to hear is the fear of the person.
Well, what I found with him was, even though I went to him after you, he was just in it for the money. It was like, come on, come in, sit down. Okay, let's, you were invested. There's a big difference between your approach and his. You spent a lot more time, you were more interested, you were more caring. And it was a much different experience. And with him, he just sat me down in the chair, kind of got me relaxed. I would have been a little bit more aware with him than I was with you. You got me a bit deeper under than he did. And they said, okay, is there anyone there? No. Does anybody want to give me a message? No. Okay, right. Okay, get up, you're gone. And it was like that. Not quite that quick, but I was sharp enough and quick enough. But what he said to me afterwards, I was sitting in the chair and I had my mobile phones switched on flight mode beside me. And he said, was your phone on? And I said, well, no, it was on flight mode. So I said, there was nothing coming in or out. And he said, while you were regressed, he said, a white orb appeared on the screen of your phone and it started moving up and down. And I said, all right. And I thought I felt a shadow during the regression. And what he told me is he stood up in front of me because he had these blinds, window with blinds. And the way there's little holes in the blinds. And he stood up in front of the holes in case it was the reflection of the sun on the screen of the phone. But he said, no, he said, the orb kept going. He said, while I was standing in front of the phone. And then he got kind of freaked and said, okay, I could tell he was freaked. And he was like, okay, thanks very much. Okay, bye. And he couldn't get me out the door quick enough, But with you, you spent more time and you took your time. I just know and felt you were there for me.
What would you say was the outcome for you? I
don't know. There was no outcome with him. It just I just felt like it was like over in a flash and in and out the door and gone. And it was just, give me your money, I mean, the orb, it had to be some sort of extraterrestrial contact. It had to be because my phone was on flight mode and the screen was black. And an orb has never appeared on my phone before, So I don't know, was that the ET kind of...
Did you feel from our sessions, which I think were 3, were they 3, that you either had some answers or that it brought something, because people are always interested to hear, the outcome?
I suppose the reason I was drawn to you, and I don't know why. The second I saw your podcast, that's when I knew I had to do that first podcast with you. I don't know why. I'd never seen or heard of the ET Newsroom before. It just happened to come up on my Facebook feed. And as soon as I saw you, and as soon as I heard you for like 10 seconds, I knew nothing about you, I knew I had to contact you. I suppose when I found out that you did the regression therapy, what I was hoping to find out from it was, had I ever physically met the ETs? Because I had so much contact with them. And I wanted to know, had I ever been on a ship? Had I ever physically met them? Had I ever shook hands with them? Had I ever given them a hug? Had I ever had any kind of other contact? I mean, there's been various types of contact, but any physical contact, had I ever physically met them? Still don't know if I have.
I don't think that didn't come up as a feature, but what tends to come up is what it is that you need to get in touch with. And because when I do any kind of healing sessions or regression sessions, I don't tend to remember I do in the short term, of course. Longer term, I don't, because it's not my energy. It pretty much leaves me quite quickly, the detail. So that's why I often ask people, and what was it? And like, we'll just perhaps talk about that end part. That was some strange sound. Do you want to just describe it?
Yeah, just to finish that bit, I did feel better after the regression. I did get some healing from it. You know, it may not have answered all my questions, but I'm glad we did it, and I'm glad I did it with you, you know. Yeah, because I just remember you bringing me back at the end of the regression. I remember the entire regression, except for the last little bit. And when I came fully to, you know, you were there, you know, take your time, relax, you know, open your eyes, come about. And when I finally came to, you said to me, do you remember hearing any weird noise? And I said, do you remember all the regression? I said, I do, I remember it all. And you said, do you remember a noise? And I said, no, I don't remember any noise. And then you showed me the recording, and I don't remember making that noise. There was no one else in the house. There was no dogs around. There was no one. And yet that noise seemed to be generating, I think, from me, but you couldn't see my lips or my throat move. And then there was this weird kind of electronic kind of woo, woo, woo at the end of it. What that was.
It actually sounds to me like it's not actually you, but from very close to you.
Maybe.
I mean, I don't know. Who knows? We don't know, actually. But I can tell you that your ET friends, they will have known that you will have been going through that they're there, that they're tuning in. And although it was strange, you know, I think it's just an indicator that they're there.
I've kind of gotten used to strange. Yeah. As I said to you before, I was anally skeptical before all this. I just didn't believe any of it. And now, you know, I can't discount anything. It's just, yeah, it's definitely been a strange journey for sure.
Well, that's why it's going to be so great for you to meet and have a chat along with myself, with Reinerio Hernandez, also known as Rey. So I'm going to play this little clip now, and then we're going to get into our interview with Rey. So thanks very much, Howard, for that. Of course, you're going to be my co-host, so I'll be seeing you shortly.
Looking forward to it.
Okay. Okay.
My name is Reinerio Hernandez. I'm a tax attorney. I had zero interest in anything that was paranormal related. And then, holy shit, what the hell just happened? I knew that this was not a dream. This was very, very real. And I needed to find out what happened to me.
Rey Hernandez graduated with honours from Rutgers College, was a master's candidate at Cornell University, and was a PhD candidate at the University of California at Berkeley, where he was the recipient of a National Science Foundation PhD fellowship. He previously was a professor for 6 years at the New School of Social Research and at the City of New York. Now, previous to March 2012, Rey had zero interest in the topic of consciousness or any of the so-called Paranormal Contact Modalities. But on March 4th, 2012, that all changed, and I'm going to let Ray tell you what that experience was. But for 3 years after that, Ray began to have diverse paranormal contact experiences via what he coined the contact modalities: NDEs, OBEs, UFOs, ghosts, spirits, remote viewing, channeling, etc. Ray is currently the director of the Consciousness and Contact Research Institute, or CCRI, a 501c3 academic research institute comprised of more than 25 PhD academics, medical doctors and researchers whose mission is to explore a new paradigm that seeks to integrate the findings of consciousness research and the phenomenology of extraordinary experiences. Ray was previously one of the 4 co-founders of the Dr. Edgar Mitchell Free Foundation, an academic research foundation comprised of 12 PhD academics and lay researchers who, during a 5-year period, conducted the world's first and only comprehensive academic statistical multi-language research study on UFO contact experiences. Much of Free's research data, based on responses from over 4,300 UFO contact experiences from over 100 countries, contradicts much of what is circulating in mainstream materialist ufology. Ray was one of the 3 co-editors of the historic 820 pages academic book titled Beyond UFOs: The Science of Consciousness and Contact with Non-Human Intelligence. Ray has published 5 new books, which are a 4-volume book series, 800 pages for each volume, titled A Greater Reality: The New Paradigm of Non-Local Consciousness, the Paranormal and the Contact Modalities. His most recent book is titled The Mind of God, a Spiritual Virtual Reality Model of Consciousness and the Contact Modalities. These books attempt to provide an academic theoretical framework for the relationship between consciousness and the contact modalities. Ray has also published in several peer-reviewed academic journals, including the Journal of Consciousness Studies and the Journal of the Society for Scientific Exploration. Website is https://agreaterreality.com, and his email is info@agreaterreality.com. Welcome, Ray. Say hello, everybody. This is the 9th of December 2024. Listen, I'm still in May. How did we get to December? But Ray, I didn't recognize you. So do tell us how your life has changed, because you're not even in Miami, Florida anymore, as I understand it.
Yes, I'm currently living in Colombia, which has allowed me to write an additional 8 new books. It's all part of this new organization that was founded 3 years ago, called the Consciousness and Contact Research Institute, which is comprised of 25 PhD academics and medical doctors and a few non-academic researchers. But all of us have an interest in exploring the relationship between consciousness and the contact modalities. The contact modalities is a term that I coined in 2013 to describe all of the paranormal as one integrated phenomenon under consciousness. So I'm doing great.
And what about your family?
My daughter's going to start medical school soon. She has her own life. She's 22 years old, and so she's doing well. And I am divorced 2 years ago, but I'm very happy. And things are going very well for me, especially with my writings, my academic work. Thank you, Howard.
Ray, can we go back? And Howard, do chip in at any time. That, as I'm preparing for this interview again, because just to reference that I interviewed Ray only 2.5 years after these main events happened, which we're going to hear about again, because they're life-changing, and I think it bears repetition and revisiting. Ray, I just wanted to know, as you described yourself beforehand, before this life-changing 2012 event, which we'll get to, that you were a rationalist, atheist,
materialist.
So how does somebody like you marry or hook up with a spiritual, religious, deeply Catholic lady? The reason I'm asking about that is because in 2012, she was very much part of the incredible events that unfolded in your life?
My ex-wife, I found out later on, after the experiences started, that she herself was a major contact experiencer. And I can go into those details, but these are all orchestrated events. There's no coincidences here. 2012, March of 2012, I had attended the University of California, Berkeley for a PhD. And Berkeley has the most Nobel Prize winners in the world. So it's purely academic scientific research. So I was attending Berkeley for my PhD. Then later on, many years later, after working in several universities, I went to law school and I became an attorney, and I worked for the federal government, the U.S. Department of Treasury, for over 25 years. I'm now recently retired as of 2 years ago. And so from my experiences, I had zero interest in any of these topics. I thought everyone here on this line and listening in were just a bunch of fools. And then in March of 2012, my ex-wife and I had a joint experience with an energy being that appeared in our living room that totally healed our dog, a 15-year-old dog who we were going to be euthanizing later that afternoon. And then for both my wife and myself, we had an explosion of paranormal experiences. In my case, lasted major experiences for about 4 years after that, till 2016. And then since then, I still continue to have major experiences, but at a much diminished level. I began to have out-of-body experiences. I began to see various forms of entities, astral travel experiences. I had precognition. I began to know when other experiencers near me had major experiences. I just knew it. And I would start a conversation with them, and all of a sudden, they start talking about ghosts or spirits or their out-of-body experiences or their near-death experience. That occurred on a weekly basis. So I had basically almost all of the contact modalities, except I had 3 NDE related events.
Oh,
3
you
days
did?
in, yes, 3 days in a row, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. December 21st, 2012, December 22nd, 2012, December 23rd, 2012. So you name it, I had it. And then what happened was, after about a year of having all of these intense paranormal experiences, I had an experience where I was driving to work. And then I was taken outside of a major traffic jam into another reality. And I literally was taken outside of space and time. And I was brought to this reality. I was inside this huge wheel. The wheel was spinning slowly to the right, had different spokes. In each of the different spokes was one of the different contact modalities. Like, for example, NDEs. And I was getting all this download of what the NDE phenomenon was all about. The next one, UFOs, UFO phenomena, what it was all about. Out-of-body experience, et cetera, hallucinogenic journeys, communication with the deceased, you name it. And so it was like a massive download of information. There was never voice communication, was never a being involved. I was just in this other alternate reality. And it lasted about approximately 20 minutes or so. And then I was given very specific information about the nature of our reality, consciousness. All these experiences are all consciousness-based experiences, including UFO phenomena. Okay, for a lot of people, they're into UFOs. And then it talked to me about consciousness. It gave me some physics discussions, what I had no idea, because I have no physics background. But then later on, that came about.
Because I was curious, I didn't know that you'd actually had 3 NDE experiences.
NDE-related experiences. I could go into more detail with that. Okay, it was associated with it, but not that. What happened was that I called down my very first, quote unquote, consciousness aerial phenomenon. That's what I call them, CAPs, because these are all consciousness based. And there I learned that these were holographic projections the very first time I called it down, because here I was seeing this object. And then my friends came in their car. They began trying to explain away what they were watching. It was a huge light energy show very close to the ground. It was like 600 meters back, 100 meters tall. It was this huge aerial show of lights. And then my friends began to explain away. After like 2 minutes, I busted out laughing. And I said, you better come up with some better shit than this, because my friends don't believe you. So immediately what we were watching totally disappeared, replaced by something totally different. And so later on, I realized that this was a holographic projection. Okay. They were able to upload memories of my daughter's conversation, re-scramble it, and package it back. Daddy, you and mommies have seen UFOs. Next time you see one, call me. We never talked to our daughter about UFOs or UFO experiences. They uploaded information of my daughter. They repackaged it, sent it back. Then the way they got rid of me was, I believe that there were hundreds of mosquitoes were biting me, but there were no mosquitoes there, because when I went inside and I went to tell my ex-wife what happened, and then I told him about the mosquitoes. We had to go inside because I was eaten up by these mosquitoes. My daughter turns to me and said, "Daddy, there were no mosquitoes outside." It was like I woke up from like a hypnotic trance.
And during that time, you actually, the reason you were hearing your daughter's voice, as I understand it, was to get her to witness this event.
Correct. I didn't know what a telepathic communication was. When I heard that, I turned around. I thought my daughter was next to me. Then later on, I began to have many different telepathic communications. And the reason that was because my daughter then later began to have her own paranormal experiences.
Oh, I was going to ask about that.
Well, let me go now to the NDE. Let me skip a couple of these segments here. But here I was after that huge display. It lasted over an hour. It was literally right on top of us.
It was outside your house, wasn't it?
Outside my house, August of 2012, the same year, 6 months later. Moved now December 21st, Friday. We went to a pediatrician. My daughter had a low-grade fever. The doctor's from Colombia, where I'm currently living now. She tells me, oh, we checked her ear, nose, and throat. We checked her temperature. I don't see anything. Must have been a 48-hour flu, And so immediately a robot came out of my voice, okay? And this happened 2 days in a row. It wasn't me. It was like a robotic voice. "Excuse me, doctor. Have you ever heard the term near-death experiences? I've just finished reading approximately 300 books on this topic, and it's a phenomenon that you need to know about. And many of those books were written by medical doctors, such as yourself." And in my head, it was like, what the, I'm going crazy here. I got another person inside of me. Well, that occurred because immediately after seeing that huge UFO, that evening I went to YouTube, okay? And I realized the paranormal aspects of what had just taken place that evening with the UFO, okay? So I then began searching paranormal stuff. And then NDE video came up, and I listened to it. And then the whole night, I began to listen one NDE video after another, testimonies, right? I was totally flabbergasted by that. So then I ordered on Amazon 20 NDE books, all used books. When 5 were left, I ordered 20 more. 5 left, 20 more. I started 4 hours a day, 6 hours a day, 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day, 12, then was 16 hours a day. I wasn't doing any of my personal work with the federal government. I was just reading these NDE books one after another. So I became NDE expert.
Just to clarify, so Ray, your daughter was sick, she had a fever, and that was the near-death experience?
No. That was the reason for me to bring her to the doctor. Because my ex-wife always brought her to the doctor. I didn't even know the pediatrician, okay? And then while I was there, this robotic voice came out. Because by then, it was 4 months of me reading nonstop these NDE books. My wife was threatening to leave me, to divorce me. She said I was going crazy. All I'm doing is reading all these NDE materials. And also the science of consciousness. I was reading maybe a third of the books were on the science of consciousness.
Do you think the ETs wanted you to speak to that?
No, not ETs. I don't believe in ETs.
Okay.
That's in all of my book. It's a very lengthy, we would need a whole new interview for that. The mind of God. What's behind our reality, which is this intelligence, Akashic records, cosmic consciousness, whatever. They were orchestrating these events because that Friday, the medical doctor said, I apologized to her because her eyeballs were flashing like this after that robot voice came out. And I said, "Excuse me, doctor, I don't know why I said that." She says, "There's no need to apologize. How did you know I had one?" So then she starts telling me about her NDE in her office. She closed the door. With my daughter next to me, she starts talking about her NDE. Then the next day, same thing happened at a dinner, a church social dinner, okay, that my wife forced me to go to because she was hardcore Catholic. And so then this total stranger was sitting next to us. I said, the same robot voice came out to this man. I saw his eyeballs popped out, so I apologized to him. And I'm convinced I was going crazy, multiple splits of personalities, whatever you might want to call it. I was going crazy. And then he told me, he says, "Ray, I've never told this to anyone." And then he told me about the ND that his mother died in his house the year before, and she told him all the details of her NDE. And then Sunday, with my father, he was very, very ill. He died a year after this. But I said, this is like the Archie Bunker of Cuba. He was a total atheist. Okay. And then I told him what happened on Friday, what happened on Saturday. He goes, "That happened to me." And then he starts telling me the most profound NDE of any book I've ever read. He was up there for 20 or 30 years. He had a life review that lasted 20 or 30 years, that God is pure love, that there's no such thing as the devil, that, tons of things. And I was like blown away. So on my way home from my father's house, I hadn't gotten it. It didn't hit me. Here I was reading all the NDE books, and then Friday and Sunday, and it didn't hit me. It was on my way home from my father's house. It was like, what just happened? I finally got it. So I put down my windows. I looked up at a few stars that were in the sky, and I talked to God for the first time. And I said this to God. I said, not a religious God, okay, but the mind of God. I said, I want to thank you because in a 4-month period, you managed to totally transform an atheist, a materialist, okay, into someone that I don't have a belief. I know that I'm an eternal spiritual being. And I have that knowingness more than any Catholic priest in Miami. And for that, I want to thank you.
Any history in your family, in your grandparents or your great-grandparents or your cousins or siblings of anything like this? I mean, okay, so your dad had that phenomenal experience.
I asked my mother, have you ever talked to my father about this? And then she said, yes, after he was coming out of open heart surgery. And he said the same exact thing. So later on, I talked to my mother and I said, has anything like this ever happened to you? And she said it was when her mother was dying. This is in the early 40s of tuberculosis. My mother's 92 years old. She said that her mother, shortly before her death, said, don't bring your cousin here anymore. And my mother said, well, my cousin loves you, and that's your brother's daughter, And she said, don't bring him here, because every time she comes here, my brother comes and visits me, her dead brother, in a physical form, like an angel. And she was scared by that. She said, don't bring him here anymore. But in terms of my family, my ex-wife used to play with little beings, little people. It wasn't little grays, okay? It was small people. She described them as like 2 to 3 feet tall. And she said, they big head, large eyes. No, they were regular people. They were just little. I said, well, how long did you interact with them? Well, first I can remember until I was about 10 or 11 years old. And I said, were you scared? She said, of course not. They were my friends. I played with them all those years. And they were my secret. I never told anybody. And they were my best friends. And they taught me so many things. And so I never knew that until many years later, until we visited a joint friend of ours in New York. We stayed at her apartment. And then she told us that she used to play with the short grays, that they were her best friends. They played all the time. They taught her many, many things. And it was a very, very loving and friendly relationship. And they also saw both my wife and her in Mexico. They lived in the same state, but different cities. They would see these large beings dressed all white. They were like 8 or 9 feet tall that floated right close to them. And they wouldn't walk. And it was head on what they each were describing. They both saw it. By then, I realized that there are tons of people that were having these experiences, except they kept quiet. So that was the closest of a family member, which was my ex-wife. She had lots of paranormal experiences. She had precognitive events. She knew I had a huge lump on my back. She knew that our car was going to explode for us not to take a trip. And finally, after like 2 months of her harassing me, because I wanted to go to our very first UFO conference, it was about 4 hours away. And so I brought it to the mechanic because she was hysterical. She was not going to go. And so he said, thank God you didn't bring that car on that trip, because the whole engine would have exploded, And so she knew all these things in advance.
I've spoken to and, interviewed a lot of people, and the guy whose work I spent a lot of time around, called Mike Smith, also known as Bill Brooks. He was also, like you guys had been, died in the wool, nothing like this is real. I mean, really thought it was a load of hogwash. He had a download at age 44. So all of those years he'd been, let's say, I'm just going to use the word taken, and by grays, but he'd had incredible experiences with not only reptilians, but also the Nordics, for want of a better term, and some others. And lots of paranormal events, but then also precognitive. The day before 9/11 happened, he told me, he got his family out of the area and he said, there's going to be an attack on America. The world's going to change forever, so will America. So that precognitive element gets really strong. I don't know what mechanism in the brain triggers that.
Well, we're exploring a lot of complex topics here.
Yeah.
But in terms of our dog, for the listeners here, I totally skipped over was that this energy being appeared in our living room, put me to sleep. My wife disappeared with the dog. She had 1 hour of missing time. I didn't know what missing time was until a MUFON representative came and visited us after our third UFO contact experience. And we told her what had happened with the energy being. And she said, your wife had missing time. We didn't know what that was. But the important point here was that our dog, we were ready to euthanize her. She was totally paralyzed, 15 years old. Before the paralysis, she couldn't run, she couldn't jump. She was like a 95-year-old lady, okay? After we both woke up, the dog was running around the living room, completely healed, okay? Later on, when we did the Dr. Edgar Mitchell free experiencer research study, for those don't know about that, that was the world's first and only comprehensive academic statistical research study of UFO contact experiencers. No one has ever done that before nor since. We're like the only game in town. We had a very large team that was assembled of roughly 10 PhD academics and another 15 researchers. People included Leo Sprinkle.
Wonderful man.
Yeah, Mary Rodwell, Kathleen Martin, Barbara Lamb, Rosemary Ellen Guiley. All these people have been working with UFO contactees for at least 30 years and some 40 years. And so we also brought in various PhD academics, retired, almost all of them. And so both of us teamed up and let's say, okay, how do we go about studying for the first time the UFO phenomenon, contact phenomenon? Because it's never been studied in a statistical way. It's just been one-on-one interviews or hypnotic regressions. And there's tons of problems with hypnotic regressions, especially if you have a biased person. All of a sudden, everything is all about hybridization and evil negative beings, which is the last thing that came up in our surveys. I'm sort of skipping ahead to get to that point, but let me backtrack a little bit. And I'll try to
backtrack just once more because Howard's actually a dog behavioralist and a trainer, so he was very interested about the doggy bit. And I said, I wasn't sure how long the dog lived after the incredible healing, bearing in mind she was completely paralyzed and about to be euthanized, and she'd had a cerebral hemorrhage, hadn't she? And
cerebral hemorrhage,
and she'd got terrible age-related arthritis, so she really was in very, very poor shape. How long did she live after?
Yeah, she was like Cinderella. She lived for an entire year. The last week of her life, it was like a rapid deterioration, and where we had to bring her to the vet. But she had an entire year of being a teenager. And this medical healing, we asked that question in our surveys. Later on, I'll go into more details about our surveys, but we asked that question. 50% of the 4,350 people from around the world that took our surveys, 50% said that either they or an immediate family member had a quote unquote miraculous medical healing by non-human intelligence. So it was a large phenomenon, which has been glossed over by the field of ufology, except for a few people. For example, Preston Dennett, who you might know of his work.
Yes, yeah.
Preston Dennett, years before we did our study, he wrote a book about 100 cases of UFO healings. We then published a chapter 6 in our book, Beyond UFOs, on UFO healings, where we had Dr. Joseph Burks, who's a retired medical doctor, look at the medical records of 12 selected case studies. One of them was Kathleen Martin, except she didn't want us to publish her name at that time, but she had a miraculous medical healing. And two other medical doctors that were part of that small case study. So Dr. Burks reviewed the medical records, how it evolved. And then Preston helped to write it with Dr. Burks. And then later on, Preston wrote a separate book titled 300 Cases of UFO Medical Healings. But yet the field of ufology, these type of topics are totally ignored. Anything that's all consciousness related. They prefer UFO crashes, UFO sightings, disclosure, Pentagon.
I think it's getting out there now. Your tremendous work has really forged a pathway in that regard, along as well as, Grant Cameron. He kind of realized probably around the same time you were having your experiences that it's about consciousness.
Yeah. Let me tell you how the Free Foundation evolved, okay? Yeah. After that out-of-body experiences, when I got home from work, I couldn't work that afternoon. I came home early, and then all of a sudden I got an email from Mary Rodwell. Several months before, back in October, this experience occurred in May of 2013. 6 months before, in October, I had sent an email to very well-known names in the field of UFO contact. experiencers. And only a few people responded back. One was Whitley Strieber, the other one was Grant Cameron, because I thought it was going crazy. It was like these nonstop paranormal experiences. Mary responds that same afternoon that I had that out-of-body experience. Dear Ray, I'm sorry that I haven't responded to an email that you had sent me back 6 months ago, but today it just popped up on my computer. And I was like, well, this is what happened today. And I told her the details, which I haven't really gone into the details of what happened during that experience. And then this is for the last 6 months, my journal of my experiences. And she was like, oh my God, Ray, I need to talk to you. So we talked till like 1:30 in the morning. Then I told her I got to go to work the next day. It's 1:30 in the morning for me. So then the very next day, I got a phone call. Hello, is this Rey Hernandez? Yes. Who is this? Dr. Rudy Shields. Who are you? Well, he's an emeritus professor of astrophysics from Harvard University. He was very, very dear friend of the late John Mack, who introduced him to these topics, and that's how he got hooked on it. And then we spoke for over an hour. He said, Ray, what you got was a download of Dr. Edgar Mitchell's quantum hologram theory of consciousness. And then he said, write down this telephone number. And I wrote it down and said, this is the telephone number of my mentor. So I said, well, who's your mentor? He goes, Dr. Edgar Mitchell. And so he said, I'm going to call Dr. Edgar Mitchell. He needs to meet you right away. Your experiences, your story is extremely important. So I called up the number. Edgar invited me to his house the very next day. So within 48 hours of me having that out-of-body experience, I was introduced to Mary Rodwell, Dr. Rudy Shields, and Dr. Edgar Mitchell. We became the 4 co-founders of the Dr. Edgar Mitchell Free Foundation. And then in Edgar's house, thought they were kooks. I thought he was a kook, but he was a genius. He was a genius. And then he told me, Edgar, I have no idea what I'm going to do, because I was given a very specific mission of what I needed to do. He says, don't worry, Ray, it'll come to you. It always works that way.
I can hear some other voice in the background. I don't know whether somebody's got a radio on.
Nothing on in the background.
Oh, right.
Se escucha tu voz. Okay, we're back again. That was my mother.
Ask you something.
Gracias, señorita.
As Joanne said, I'm a canine behavior, so I was really interested in your dog healing story. I told it actually to my sister Jeannie the other day. She has 7 pugs, so she's dog crazy as well, and she loved the story. But I just wanted to ask you, had you yourself any kind of personal healing?
Just of my life, recently.
Okay.
Had other very recent paranormal experiences. I can go into those as well.
Okay.
But those are very recent.
All right. Okay.
The 4 of us as the co-founders of what eventually came to be known as the Dr. Edgar Mitchell Free Foundation, together with all these PhD academics and these very famous researchers, we undertook the world's first and only comprehensive academic statistical research study of UFO contact experiencers over a 3-year period of collecting data from 3 surveys. 2 of them were quantitative, comprised of 700 questions, and 1 was qualitative, which was comprised of 70 open-ended questions. We've received responses from more than 4,350 individuals from over 125 countries, all for our English language survey. We also did it in Spanish. We had almost 1,500 individuals responded to our Spanish survey. And so then we spent an entire year of crunching out the data, analyzing it, and we published an 820-page book titled Beyond UFOs, The Science of Consciousness and Contact with Non-Human Intelligence. And our data pretty much contradicts almost everything circulating in materialist ufology. If people really want to find out what the UFO phenomenon is all about, we're the only game in town from a scientific and academic and statistical perspective. And I'm giving the book away for free, the PDF book.
I haven't quite got through it all yet.
820 pages. As I said before, we could spend an entire day just going over the data, what the data says. Total contradiction of what's circulating in materialism.
Give us some of those percentages that are so interesting, because people can grasp those quite easily, I think.
Okay. Well, one of the things that we want to explore was the experience positive, negative, or neutral? Because Bud Hopkins and David Jacobs, where they were invited to speak at all the major UFO conferences in the US, and their perspective was it was purely negative. what we asked that question in more than 25 different ways, because how you phrase a question, you'll get a different response. For example, one question was, if you could stop your ET contact experiences, would you? Thinking that if this is all so negative, people want to stop it. No, I don't want any more of this stuff. Well, 84% of the people said, no, don't stop it. Okay. And tons of other questions. We asked the question straightforward. Was it positive, negative, or neutral? Okay. What we found out was that in the very beginning of their experiences, 1/3 of the people said it was negative. Beyond a shadow of a doubt, negative. I don't want to deal with this stuff. But then what happened over the years, these people began to have additional experiences. And over time, the nature of the experience and their perception of the experiences changed to positive. So after 20 or 30 years, all of a sudden, they checked the box off. It was highly positive.
When I started having my experiences back in 2020, I was terrified. I mean, I was going to the bathroom at night time with the torch and, looking to see was there anything on the corridor.
Yeah.
Until over that. And now it's classified as completely positive. It has changed my life in the best of ways, in every way. My consciousness is much higher. My awareness is much higher. I think it is. I mean, I was always a good person, but I think it's made me even a better person than I was.
Yeah.
And as I said to Joanne, they've helped me at times when I've asked for it. Genuinely.
Yes. So that's just what you just said is just one tiny component of the questions that we asked. We also asked, how did you change from before your experience to after experience? And we asked 70 questions. Okay. For example, your fear of death. All of a sudden, it was like 85% of the people said, I no longer fear death. Okay. Are you more loving and caring? Again, it was like another 85% said, I'm much more loving and caring. And it went on and on and on. Wealth. Material wealth. All of a sudden, people are not concerned about material wealth. Your spirituality grow, stay the same, or did it decrease? Well, all of a sudden, boom, the increase in spirit, not religious perspectives, but spirituality. So we asked over 70 questions, and these people changed tremendously to a positive perspective. If I could go over about 4 major findings. One was that these experiences were overwhelmingly positive over the long term. At the end, only 4% viewed their experiences as negative over the long term, not initially. Okay. And then number 2, these experiences were totally transformative of the person. It's a new person. It's a new Howard that came out from these experiences. Okay.
Yeah.
Number 3, these experiences involve a manipulation of space-time. Okay. Why? Because 50% of the people who took our surveys were brought to other multidimensional realities, like I was. Okay, where they were taught, the vast majority of cases, spiritual lessons. Okay, and even the people that had physical encounters with these beings, most of them were teaching type of experiences. It wasn't the stereotypical abduction type of experience. Yes, there were a certain group of people that had these type of experiences, but they changed over time. In the beginning, it was like a typical abduction type of scary scenario. Okay, but then later on, they were bringing me to other dimensions. They were giving me spiritual teachings. They were giving me life reviews, even when I wasn't dead. They were showing me, look, Ray, you screwed up here, you screwed up there. You need to change this way, that way. So it was like total transformation of lessons. So one is the out-of-body experiences, the astral travel experiences. 50% were brought to other multidimensional realities by this non-human intelligence. And then a whole bunch of other cases, okay? So we concluded that these experiences involve a manipulation of space-time. Well, guess what? Dr. J. Allen Hynek, the last year of his life, he said the same thing, that the UFO phenomenon involves both materialist aspects as well as psyche, okay? What is Jacques Vallée, those are the 2 top UFO researchers of all time. Okay, the same thing. Jacques Vallée, I don't believe these are ETs coming from a physical planet coming to visit us. This is something much more complex. The phenomenon is both physical and psyche. Psyche is consciousness, but yet nobody in ufology talks about this. But yet the 2 godfathers of ufology speak about it and adhere to that position. Other aspects that we talked about in our book pretty much contradict what is going on in mainstream materialist ufology. If you send me an email, and my email is my first name, spelled Reinerio RIO, followed by my last name, HERNANDEZ @gmail.com. I'll send you the 800 pages PDF version of Beyond UFOs, because it's so important. We need to give it away, because right now very few people have purchased a physical hard copy of it. That's why ufology is still totally clueless, because I've never been invited to a major UFO conference. Never.
Oh, really? I find that surprising.
Never, because once they read the title of that book, it says Beyond UFOs, the Science of Consciousness and Contact with Non-Human Intelligence. First of all, the topic of contact with non-human intelligence was totally dismissed for the last 60 years in mainstream ufology. It's like, we don't want to go there, okay? And then the topic of consciousness, only recently has that topic has begun to be not accepted, but to be explored by the field of materialist ufology, okay? But in terms of the conclusions and the questions that we asked from 4,350 people, those type of topics nobody knows about, because they never bothered to read a book. So now I'm giving it away for free.
I think also from the materialistic point of view, we're in a 3D world. And so people of that mindset who are a bit locked out, like I would say that Mike Smith was, and many other people like yourself and Howard were before, not myself. I've always been very plastic in my consciousness, very fluid.
It's normal because
it is normal
the five senses, we hear, we smell, we taste, we touch, etc. All the five senses is all materialism. Okay, but think outside of that box, it's almost impossible.
That's what I mean, is that most people have just a hard enough time living and breathing here, paying for a roof over their head these days. The challenges to give yourself that space and that awareness, and also to feel safe doing that. One event that happened to me not long after I'd started the Amash project, which got hijacked and killed, which is why it's now the ET Newsroom. In the first year, so I started it in January 2011, and by 2012, actually that's really interesting, Ray, it's the same year. In January 2012, actually, I had an amazing kind of paranormal experience where I was kind of electrified from head to foot. And I mean, it was like somebody had stuck my crown into a socket, and my entire body took a really massive electrical hit. I mean, it was shocking to say the least, and no pun intended. And I'm not prone to paranormal events either. I'm really very grounded. So later on that day, I saw this, I'm going to call it a tetrahedron. It was like a tetrahedron was sat on my head. And I know this sounds absolutely ridiculous. And as the two pieces rotated, I began to feel a change in consciousness. Now, I kind of put the brakes on that. And then I had to go to work. And I was sitting at traffic, waiting to go onto a very, very busy roundabout junction. And I just put my attention, my consciousness on this tetrahedron that seemed to be still in place. It was almost like I was wearing a kind of a plinth with this object moving on it. I don't know what that is still, but as I put my attention there, bearing in mind I'm in solid traffic here, and we're about to go in a moment or two, the movement of this contrary rotation began to lift my consciousness out of my body, and I thought, oh, friggin' hell, I'm in traffic. I could crash. I could cause an international incident here. And I yanked myself back because I was very afraid, not of so much the event. Well, that was a bit disconcerting, but I was afraid of the situation I was in. And so, we're not schooled in any of these things. We're not taught how to deal with that. And afterwards, I couldn't ever get back to experience that tetrahedron rotating, counter-rotating tetrahedral force, which seemed to be precipitated by this massive electrical plugged into the center of the eye of God. I don't know what that was, but it blasted some energy through me.
It seems like what a lot of people describe that as a Kundalini experience. Kundalini.
But it happened from my crown, not from my bed. Yeah. It often goes the other way.
No. A lot of people describe it.
Oh, really?
Have to be in bed. Oh, yeah.
Okay, then.
Oh, yeah.
Well, maybe.
And what I was going to say, what I forgot to say, was that one of the major findings from the Free Foundation survey was that Yes, these people have had physical experiences. They've physically seen a UFO. They've physically seen beings, okay? Not all of them, or roughly 80% of them saw physical beings. Others interacted with them via telepathic communication, okay? But there was this physicality associated to it. But the overwhelming percentages of their experiences were paranormal in nature.
Yeah.
It did not deal with physicality. They were having out-of-body experiences. They were having near-death experiences. They were having remote viewing. They were having precognitive events. They were seeing dead people. It was like 60% of these people saw dead people.
Really, it's about creating a social
Yeah.
documentation of, which is what I'm interested in, is what is this and where does it take you? What is the impact? Because
Yeah.
I don't know anybody who says at the end, no matter how scared they are and how much they want to stop it, that they haven't changed exponentially to be a more open, I'm not going to say better, a more open human being. Like Smith, the guy whose story I wrote up, which I spent, 3.5 years working with him on that, because it was very traumatic in lots of ways by humans as well, and not just the ET thing, because he was so locked out. The more locked out you are, it seems, I think the more traumatic it is. Whereas for me, I would be shocked and maybe I'd be a bit traumatized for a moment, but I also have a lot of skills that I can bring myself back with quite quickly, and to rationalize it in a kind of non-rational way, if you see what I mean. But he said at one point, I don't know why I've been asleep for so long, because really when he had these experiences age 44, it was such a big shock. It took him another 20 years to assimilate everything that he'd been through, because he'd been taken since he was a little kid, like 2 or 3 years old. He really thought he was going insane.
Joanne, as you were saying there, we're living in a 3D world, and it's so far out, so far away from what people perceive as normal. Like, I've had people share experiences with me, like one of my best friends, and a craft flew over the house, and we're looking at it, and he's tipped me. He's like, I know this is what I've been telling you. And he's like, but. And I said, I know. And then the next day I said, well, what did you think of the light show last night? And he goes, oh, that could have been a gust of wind, or that could have been a flick of the sun, or that could have, and it's the brain's defense mechanism, telling you what you saw wasn't real, or it'll tell you anything.
I think also, guys, we've had to deal with eons of mainstream media ridiculing people and making people's lives hell. And also, we all know of cases of researchers and other experiences who've got a little bit too near to getting the truth out to the public for the intelligence services' comfort. And there's been a lot of deaths in the UFO community as well. So that's just another layer as we come in. I think, Ray, what you and your colleagues are doing with this is absolutely pertinent and really fantastic for the world, because we really do need an academic reference point. I'm not an academician, but I absolutely appreciate it, and I know it is something we need, and it's absolutely of value as a reference point. So thank you for all that you're doing.
You're very welcome. What we all realized from our group, we all knew that these things were taking place. Mary Rodwell knew these things. Leo Sprinkle knew it. Kathleen Martin, Barbara Lamb, et cetera, of what was occurring with UFO contactees. But what a research study did was actually quantify it with statistics, with thousands of people, okay? But they already knew what was going to show up. Now, what happened after that was that our work was never intended to be about ufology per se. What we wanted to do is to get basic data on the UFO phenomenon and compare it to NDE phenomenon, to out-of-body experiences, to hallucinogenic journeys, to all of the contact modalities. But there was zero data on UFO contact experiences, so we had nothing to compare it to. Okay. And so once we had that data, then we're able to open up the bigger picture. Okay. And so what I did, and several of the other academic professors, we then started a new organization that focused on the contact modalities, not UFOs, but all of the paranormal and its relationship to consciousness. So we formed this separate organization, which is primarily an academic institute. And so what we wanted to do was to prepare humanity, both from an academic perspective and an experiencer perspective, to show, number one, that consciousness is primary. not our physical 4D reality. Okay, but consciousness is primary. Secondly, we wanted to demonstrate that all of what is commonly seen as the paranormal, they're being studied and viewed as separate and distinct phenomenon, when in fact they are not. They're all integrated as one integrated phenomenon under consciousness, which we labeled as the contact modalities. And so what we did is we began publishing a series of books, very large books. Each of them are 800 pages. Volumes 1 and 2 are 800 pages each. And these are books that are theoretical in nature. They're not written only a PhD academic can understand it. They're written for the normal person to understand it, but it's not in simplistic language. It's a little bit more sophisticated. And what this does is explains to the readers the NDE phenomenon, the out-of-body experiences, the hallucinogenic journeys, the UFO phenomenon, etc., as relates to consciousness. For example, just on the topic of UFOs, we have 11 articles that discuss UFOs as a consciousness-based phenomenon. Okay, you will never find that anywhere. And then we have all of the contact modalities. And then that's 2 volumes that discuss that, because we all believe that consciousness is fundamental and that all of the paranormal is one phenomenon. And then for volumes 3, 4, 5, 6, these are, again, 800-page books, but they're chapters written by major experiencers of the contact modalities. And these individuals, as we've just been discussing, they're not just seeing UFOs and seeing UFO-related type of beings. They're having everything in the kitchen sink in their experiences. One example for people to understand is Dr. Melinda Greer, a recently retired pediatrician that works in a hospital treating the most sick children in the state of Oklahoma. So she's been an experiencer since she was a young child, but she has seen 14 up-close UFOs. All different shapes and sizes, okay? She's seen numerous types of physical looking beings, okay? She's had 3 Sasquatch experiences, 2 of them very up close, where she could, touch them or throw a rock at the being, okay? And she's had 2 near-death experiences. After her second near-death experience, she began to see dead people, okay? And on and on, out-of-body experience, astral travel experience. Yet this woman is saving the lives of hundreds of little children, every year. And so we have 4 books filled with stories from different individuals of their experiences.
I think it's absolutely fascinating that it crosses the boundaries, because I am very interested in the cryptid world. On the album Eclectic, we've got Steve Boucher, and Steve Boucher is a Canadian lifelong experiencer. He even actually remembers being on the moon looking down at Earth with someone who was saying, you have to go. But the thing I wanted to bring up was that he had experiences most of his life. And when he was a kid, sort of 9, 10, 11, he was playing out with his friend, saw a craft, and they thought, oh my goodness, we better get out the way. Anyway, they didn't manage to get out the way, because the next thing they know, they see this huge, hairy creature who picks them each one up like this and carries it to the nearby craft, sits the 2 boys down, and he sees this massive Sasquatch sitting in this chair, and he's just sat in front of the 2 boys, and the ETs are doing whatever they're doing, but the boys cannot take their eyes off eyeballing this Sasquatch. They've never seen such a being before, and the ET comes up to them and said, okay guys, can you just stop staring at him? It's making him uncomfortable. No negativity, there was no harm. I had never heard for Steve's story about a Sasquatch being part of a reconnaissance team for the Greys. In this case, it was the Greys, and having his own massive chair.
Sasquatch has been associated with experiencers of the contact modalities. These people that have had an extensive paranormal experiences, so they're part of that. Now, one of the findings that we found out was that these individuals of these contact experiencers have had interactions with thousands of different types of beings. Okay. And there's a friend of mine down here in Miami. His name is Albert Rosales. He's written 15 books about thousands of different humanoids that people have encountered. We asked 12 different types of beings. Have you had interactions with these 12? And then number 13 was other. It's none of the above. Well, we found out that the number one answer was other. It wasn't these 12 that you put down. The number one type of physical being that people did interact with that we were able to quantify was the energy being. It wasn't the small grays. It was the energy being. That was number one. Number two, the human-looking being. That was the second largest group of encounters. The number three, actually number four, if we count others, none of the above, the number four type of being was the small grays. But yet, if you go into these websites, you'll see it's primarily these small grays. Well, we found out that that's not the case.
I had an experience with an energy being. It took control of my phone and it took a photo of itself. I must send it to you to see, is it anything like the energy being that you had the experience with?
You need to send me an email and we can start communicating. And I can send you copies of my books. Most of the new ones are not published yet. Like, for example, the Greater Reality book series, we have 6 books in that. 2 are theoretical and academic, and then 4 are chapters written by experiencers. I wrote an introduction to these Greater Reality book series titled The Mind of God, a spiritual virtual reality model of consciousness and the contact modalities. That's 250 pages. So that's an introduction to these book series. And it lays out my theory of what is consciousness and what the hell is really going on behind the scenes. And then I just recently wrote a book about my personal experiences. It has the same title as our documentary. We've been working on a documentary for 6 years. And the title of my personal book and the documentary is A Greater Reality, One Man's Journey of Discovery. And all of them, the documentary is going to be finished in early 2025. And I was just meeting with the people. There's 3 of us that are putting it together. So they were showing me what they already have. It's like unbelievable.
Yeah, I think I feature the trailer as well in our intro. So it's brilliant, yeah. Ray. Absolutely fantastic.
Have you done any research into psychedelics, like DMT and
Yes. I haven't done the research of it.
Well, it seems to be going around the internet at the moment.
What we have is 2 academic articles, one written by a professor at Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine, and the other one is a professor that has been studied hallucinogens for over 20 years, and he's out of, I guess, the University of London, a major institution in the UK, and both of them talked about psychedelics like a near-death experience. They compared the use of psilocybin, the use of DMT, those are the active ingredients in ayahuasca, as a near-death experience. And they begin comparing both aspects of both groups. And so, yes, we do focus on that. And those 2 chapters are in our book, A Greater Reality.
Well, I actually did go to Peru in 2011, just after I started the AMASH project, well, not a few months after, about May. And I went with a friend to the Amazon jungle and found an English-speaking guy and went through the ayahuasca experience, which I won't go into here, but it definitely cracks open.
You should go on.
And one last thing, I would encourage all of the listeners, including both of you, to go to the CCRI website. Many of our books are there for free to upload, including volumes 1 and volumes 2 of our Greater Reality book series. You could also get chapters 1 and chapters 2 from our Beyond UFOs book. Volumes 1 and volume 2 are 300 pages, just that, all about UFO academic statistical research. And then we also have an academic article that was published on the research data on Beyond UFOs. So this is published in a peer-reviewed academic journal. And all of that's available for free for anyone to upload. Now,
I'm repeating myself. I think it's so important, the work that you've been doing.
Yeah. And it's free. The website is agreaterreality.com. agreaterreality.com. Go there, put your name, your email there, so you can get more additional information in the future as we publish these new books. And all this is for free. You have literally 3 books available for free.
And I tell you what, it would be quite interesting to do at some point is form some kind of groups to come together. Oh, did you see all those orbs?
I saw the orbs.
Yes, I saw them.
whilst I was recording the intro, an orb zipped through. That sometimes happens when I'm working.
And you know something, guys? My left ear has been ringing all the way through the interview, and that's always a sign that they're around. When my left ear rings, it's always the left ear.
It's very common when I'm being interviewed.
I find it on occasion. Certainly, this is probably the 6th time it's happened. And yesterday, just as a quick aside, I was wanting to send a girlfriend of mine or frame for her a picture of us. Found this old one from 2012, us in our PJs, sitting on a couch, just looking like a couple of scruffy girlies about to enjoy a glass of Prosecco. There's a massive big orb on the side of the picture. So I said, oh, wow, again.
In my personal book, I discuss things that I've never discussed to anyone, including interviews. Talk a little bit about the documentary. Myself, Kevin Lane, and Helene Lane. Kevin was the film director of 10 Star Trek movies.
Oh, wow.
Okay, he's the real deal. Here in Miami, he films all of the big entertainment artists. Like, for example, Shakira. Shakira only works with Kevin. And he was on call with Shakira all day on Sunday when I was with him. So that's the level of this person is. You saw the quality of our trailer.
It's fantastic.
We literally have 4 hours of this, except we need to whittle it down to 90 minutes. And the topics that we were discussing there, let me just tell you at the end how it ends, okay? It ends, well, the whole topic is about exactly what we've been talking about, consciousness and the contact modalities. We end with spirituality and with love, because almost all of the major NDE researchers, people like Raymond Moody, we interviewed, people like Dr. Jeffrey Long, been studying for 35 years NDEs, Jeffrey Mishloff, numerous other people, Dr. Bruce Grayson. He was one of the pioneers with Dr. Moody on NDE academic research. So all of them say, Ray, the most important lesson that people learned based upon having a near-death experience when they returned is that they're told, by the mind of God, they're told, look, it's not important how much money you have. It's not important how famous you are. It's not important what religion you are. What's most important is that when you return, you need to learn how to love. Okay? And so I put that all in both of my arms.
Very good.
As you'll see, both of my arms, you'll see the infinity sign and you'll see the love sign. Okay. Now, I'm not into love and light like a lot of these other people. No, what infinity means that we learn from near-death experiences that we are an eternal spiritual being. And the love is what unifies us all. We're here on this 4D physical plane to learn how to love. And so that's how we end, with like about a 5-minute segment just on this concept that we're all eternal spiritual beings and the importance of love. And then right before that, we talk about the mind of God. We're all one. We're all interconnected. There's no separateness. And we have, all these major philosophers, psychiatrists, academics, as well as major experiencers, okay, and major researchers. All, like, for example, Kathleen Martin saying we're all one, et cetera, together with all of these academics talking about the academic tradition that we're all one. It's coming straight from the Vedic tradition. So we have another 5 minutes talking about the unification of the one mind. These topics, ufology doesn't talk about these things, they can care less, but yet we also go into all of the contact modalities, the evolution of these people, how they change. One of the reasons how they change is the evolution that you were just discussing.
It is evolution.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's like 90% of these people change towards that, to becoming much more spiritually aware. We could call it, awareness of cosmic consciousness. They become more kinder, caring people. They understand their mission here on Earth, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's how we sort of end.
And I just wanted to mention another of the collectians is Mike Oram, who wrote a book called Does It Rain in Other Dimensions? That when I saw the cover of your book, and you said you were given that lovely design, there's a drawing in Mike's book, so similar, this funnel that came through a window. With all his experiences, he said right from a little boy of 4 years old.
My earliest experience was back in 1955 at the age of 4. when I told my mother that something of incredible importance was going to happen on this planet that would affect all units of consciousness, whether it be mineral, vegetable, animal or man. I told my mother that this would not happen in her lifetime. She did die some years ago now, but it would happen in mine. All these decades later, I now believe that what I was trying to say is that there is an energy coming into this solar system that would give people the opportunity to ascend to a higher frequency. After this, I started to see who I now call my space brother. His name is Telos, who visited me throughout my life. At one time when I was walking along a country lane near where I lived some years ago, he appeared beside me. A portal opened up on the other side of the lane, and I was given the opportunity to go through this portal and go back home. I decided to stay as I wanted to continue making people aware of this change of frequency. He said if I stay, I will suffer intense pain until my passing. Since then, I have developed a degenerative neurological condition that leaves me in severe pain 24/7. Telos only comes to visit when it is absolutely necessary to give me a message or otherwise.
A lot of the experiences energetically that he's had, he said, there is so much love. And he said, and it's not love with small letters, it's soul-searing love. It's amazing. And that seems to be the root.
Yes, I mean, that is when you, as I told you, I was guided immediately after that UFO, watching this consciousness aerial phenomena. I call them CAPs. I don't use the word UFOs. After this consciousness aerial phenomena, I was led to the NDE, and I became an NDE expert. And I became very close personal friends with almost most of the major researchers on near-death experiences. And what you listen to these stories, one after another, after another, after another, the vast majority of them say that once they enter this environment, it's like a love. If you could imagine the love that a mother has for their child, multiply that by 1 billion. Okay, that's how some of them have described that environment. All of a sudden, it's pure love. Even my own father, you know, a huge atheist that I thought that he was, telling me that, you know, there's no such thing as evil. Why? Because God is pure love, and talks about, you know, these topics. And I was like blown away. But if you listen to other NDE experiencers, that's overwhelmingly what comes across. But not only that, but also major UFO contact experiencers have had these types of experiences. There's one woman, she's had major UFO contact experiences. She talked about a paranormal experience that she had when she went to a cemetery in the United States with dead soldiers. I forgot the formal name of it. It's very famous, Arlington National Cemetery. Okay, her brother died in the Vietnam War. Okay, all of a sudden this mist appears all around her, and it envelops her everywhere. And she said she felt this immense love, like you can't even describe how powerful that love was. And there, her brother appeared to her in spirit form, began to tell her that he was okay. You know, it was like a near-death experience, except she was in Arlington Cemetery, you know, when all of this occurred. So she was like sort of transported into another reality, had this experience, which she could still see was Arlington, but she was inside another reality, and externally was all Arlington. And she talked about the love that was emanating from all the white smoke all around her. Yeah. So many experiencers have had this tremendous number of people that describe the topic of love as it relates to their paranormal experiences. So it's not just necessarily near-death experiences. So that's what we're looking at eventually down the road. We want to be able to do a comparative academic research study comparing all the particular aspects of the phenomenon and see how they interrelate.
When my mother died in 2011, there was 5 of us in the room when she passed away. We all felt her in the room, and it was like I'm sitting there looking at her dead corpse, and all I can feel is complete love and euphoria. It lasted for about 20 minutes, and we all felt it. None of us are religious. None of us go to church.
Yeah, very common experiences there, Howard. Very common, and we're just now starting to understand just how common they are. because
And do
people
you know what I
usually
often
wouldn't talk
wondered?
about it.
Do you know what I often wondered? Did that experience open me up to my further UFO experiences? Was that the key, or I don't know?
Yes. What we discovered was that many people have had different types of triggering mechanisms, and it can work vice versa. For example, if your first experience is a UFO, you're going to have out-of-body experiences, okay? You're going to be seeing dead people. Preston Dennett, a major paranormal researcher and UFO researcher in the US, all of his experiences started seeing his dead mother in his living room about a week after she died. Then immediately he saw a show on TV about this Japanese commercial airliner that saw this huge acorn, UFO shaped, off the coast of Alaska. Then he began to ask his brother, "Oh my God, look, here's CBS News in the United States, 6 o'clock at night has this thing about UFOs." So he tells his brother, "Oh, what a coincidence. Last week, his brother, and a whole bunch of friends saw a UFO right outside the house." And then all of a sudden he was captivated. He joined MUFON, began doing UFO research. He began to call UFOs with my friend Joseph Burks. And then from there, it evolved into out-of-body experiences. He began to learn how to do out-of-body experiences. Took him a very long time, but he began to have OBEs. Then after that, he wanted to master astral travel experiences. After a long time, he mastered it. Now, I asked him, "What's your most profound experience, Preston?" He says, "Beyond a shadow of a doubt, astral travel experiences." And so it all started with seeing his dead mother. And he was ready, was an adult.
I noticed that in 2009, things started showing up around me. I've got a picture of myself taken in November in York in the UK. And my friend just took a snap, and there's this orb sitting a foot above my head. And I didn't feel anything. They didn't see it, the person who took the picture. It's very interesting.
We have a section in our documentary just on orbs. We have this retired PhD professor from Stanford University, professor of physics, that began researching orbs and published a book on orbs. So here's this major physicist talking about orbs in our documentary. And then we had experiencers that have talked about their experiences with orbs. So in our documentary, we go through all of the paranormal, and we have a very focus on consciousness. What is the nature of our reality as it relates to all of the paranormal? And so I think what we're doing, no one has ever done before, just like the UFO study. UFO research study, we asked that topic of how do they change, that spiritual transformation. And we asked numerous questions on that topic.
Yeah.
But again, it was like over 85% of these people became love and light. People that had no understanding of what this was. And I want to, in terms of NDE, let me just tell a story of Dr. Melinda Greer, which is a concept which is rarely discussed. And that is, when she died, she talked about, and this is what my hypothesis is as well, of the NDE phenomenon, that when we die, our soul, spirit, whatever you might want to call it, returns back to source. And then we rejoin source. But what happens is that our life experience, as Rey Hernandez, as Joanne, as Howard, all that experience gets uploaded into a central database, into the Akashic records, the mind of God, so to say. And what is left is just your spirit, your soul, your consciousness, without Rey Hernandez, without Joanne, or without Howard, who your essence is. And then we reincarnate into another experience. But our memory banks are stored there in the Akashic records. So that's what God really is. The way I tell people, illustrate it, to think about it, is that picture a brain, okay? A brain has billions of neurons. And the neurons are like little independent units of transmission. So what we are as a soul or a spirit is a little neuron. When we die, the neuron is still attached to God. So we're still part of God, okay? But whoever we are in this physical plane goes back, if you can imagine, like a sperm wiggling back and going into the ovum. Well, that's the brain, the big gigantic brain. So that's when people die, when people have out-of-body experiences, when people have astral travel experiences, when people have UFO related type of experiences. One of the common phenomenon is that all of a sudden I knew everything. I had universal knowledge, and all of a sudden it was taken away. Where did it go? Well, that was because our soul, our spirit, our consciousness reunited with source. And so we were tapped into God, information. okay, of the mind of God. So we knew everything, just like the mind of God. But then we were told, no, you got to come back. No, I don't want to come back. No way, I'm going back. No, you got to go back, and they kick you in the ass, and you go back into this 4D reality. Okay, then all of a sudden you're here, like, holy shit, I knew everything. I knew about this, I knew about that, but where did it go? Well, that's what happens. Metaphorically, I'm discussing this, and so Melinda Greer talked about when she died, her life experiences, Dr. Melinda Greer, was uploaded into some type of computer. And then what remained was a soul that interacted with other like souls. And in our documentary, we present that, we discuss that. Another major concept that I want to present, which is in both our documentary and in volume 3 of our experiencer chapters, is a chapter by Yossi Ronin, who's from Israel. Yossi had an experience with about 4 grays. He came from work, he was dead tired, and he laid down the sofa in the late afternoon from work. All of a sudden, he was out of his body, and he was interacting with these grays, out of body. And he was acting like he knew them. Their lives, these are my friends visiting, he telepathically communicating with them in an out-of-body format, right? So all of a sudden, he wakes up, and he was like, holy shit, I was dreaming with little people, with little green people. They were green colored, right? And so all of a sudden, he heard these noises in his living room, in his bedroom. And he woke up and he turned around. They were the same little grays, okay?
Oh, really?
They were the same little grays. And then what the important part of his story was that they allowed him to enter their mind. He said they think like one mind. They appeared as 5 separate people, but in actuality, it's all one mind. And he said that they had knowledge like an angel. They had knowledge like God, universal knowledge. And they allowed him to tap some of that information. And he was like, oh my God, I know everything. Because they allowed him to get into that consciousness. And very, very detailed book. And that article is in our book of volumes 3, which is going to be published in about a month, of our Greater Reality book series. And he also has his own book titled One, O-N-E, One. And he's featured in our documentary. Another concept that he said, which is very powerful, which I've heard all the time by major experiencers, that is that this intelligence, these physical beings communicated to him and to other experiencers telepathically, that what you see us, that's not how we really are. That we can appear any way we want to, but for convenience for us, we appearing as these small grays. But that's not who we are. We're actually multi-dimensional intelligences. But when we come down for a short period of time, we take on this physical form. You know how many times I've heard that? Tons of times. But yet ufology thinks that these are physical beings coming from a physical planet to visit us almost always for less than a minute. They're coming from billions of light years away just to interact with us for 30 seconds. That's what ufology thinks. But yet even the short grays, they came in hundreds of different shapes and forms, colors, heights, some with uniforms, some with insignias, you name it. That's how people were describing just these short grays, okay? But then you look at the human-looking beings, the same thing, thousands of different human-looking beings. Then you talk about robots. Then you talk about, other types of machines, other types of beings, the owls, the elves, humanoid beings, the mantid beings. So my question is, do you really think that thousands of these different beings are coming to visit us for usually less than 30 seconds from billions of light years away? Or is it something a little bit more complex? Is it something like Jacques Vallée says, an interaction of both multidimensional being interacting with us in a physical way, but yet it's not physical, it's consciousness?
It's fascinating because clearly there is some physical material component at times to some things, but I want to go back to the knowing everything, that gnosis point. My associate producer, sadly no longer with us, Dougie Degnan, who was part of the Eclectia album, and he might have been about 5 years old at the time. He saw this light coming through a tree in his garden.
My name's Doug Degnan. I'm a vocalist, songwriter. I write some electronic music. My first experience of anything not of this world, let's say, was when I was playing in the garden in 1964 when I was 5, and looking through the pear tree, light coming through the pear tree, remember the blossom, and very, very difficult to put into words, but I was like wrapped in love and light, and all there was and ever will be in that moment was presented to me, and for want of a better word, the universe was explained down to its bits and bytes, nuts and bolts. And at that age it was quite a lot to take on board, but it felt in that moment it was happening, I knew everything, and I think I did. Unfortunately I don't anymore, and it didn't last for very long, that I knew everything feeling, but it certainly did change my life. And part of that message was that I would be living through a time when we would have to make a choice whether to carry on with the illusion, which was another part of it. It showed me a massive illusion that we was involved in, or humanity had the chance to break free of the illusion and move on. And I think we're in that time.
That's just so common, so
Yeah,
common.
but to have that experience, it changes you even when you're a toddler. You never forget. That imprints you like a stamp on your soul forever.
And so what I wanted to demonstrate by those 2 points was that here's Yossi Ronan seeing these short grays interacting with them, which are usually associated with UFOs. I don't think Yossi has ever seen a UFO, okay? And then here's Dr. Melinda Greer, who had a near-death experience, who described the same exact thing. And most NDE experiencers, I wouldn't say the majority of them, or most, I would say a very large percentage of them, have this experience where like they know everything, and all of a sudden it was taken away. But we asked that question in our surveys for the UFO contact experiencers, and it was a very large percent, maybe 60% of them answered that question. Did you ever have an experience where all of a sudden, a paranormal experience, where all of a sudden you just felt you knew everything, and all of a sudden it was taken away? It was like 60% said yes. So it's a very common phenomenon, and not just associated with near-death experiences. It's associated in many ways with what people call spiritually transformative experiences. These are like a Kundalini awakening type of experiences, similar to what you had described earlier. A Kundalini awakening experience, but a lot of people describe in that Kundalini awakening experience, all of a sudden they've received information of, no, Edgar Mitchell had that. Okay, he was coming back from the moon, and he had what he learned was a samadhi experience. It's like universal knowledge. It's like he knew everything. And what he talked about, the experience was given to him, was that there's no separation. We're all one. All the specks of dust that were out there in his travel, you know, they was passing by, all these little flecks, all this dust, whatever. He says that's us. There's no separation. And these were all like knowledge that were being described in the Vedic tradition, you know, in the Bhagavad Gita, you know. All of the ancient mystical traditions talk about that. There's no separateness. We're one. Well, Edgar Mitchell received the download of that, very extensive download. So after he returned back from the moon, he was like, what the hell happened to me? And he began to investigate that. And he learned from a professor of religion that's called a samadhi experience, an enlightening experience where you have this universal knowledge. And then he began to research, what the hell was that? How did it start? You know? And then he started the Institute for Noetic Sciences based upon that quest, that vision. And they began to focus on ESP, precognition, other types of paranormal type of ESP related experiences.
And also the kindness and compassion thing, the action of it. I heard you speaking in an interview about the amount of toads that you'd taken 1.5 miles up the road to a little pond. I always remember the very well-known now experience of Chris Bledsoe, who said in his time he was a rootin' shootin' huntin' fishing man, and he was renowned for shooting one of the area's biggest bears. I find it heartbreaking. They weren't wired to think about another consciousness in the form of a bear. But he said after his experiences, which were very traumatic for about 5 years, he also had a miraculous healing event. You probably know that case. But he said after that experience, he could never, ever harm or kill anything ever again.
I could not step on ants. I looked down to avoid stepping on an ant.
Yeah.
So yes, I understand that.
Yeah, it's absolutely fascinating. And the fear element, which is crippling. I haven't experienced that crippling fear in any of the experiences I've had, but it's like the door was open for things to come in, you know, maybe she's ready to see or hear this. And what about this one? Let's try her with that. I had one strange event when this was about 2015, I think. Had my computer, I think I was finishing off some work, and I'd kind of woken up from a sleep and realizing that I'd left my computer on. I thought, oh God, I must switch that off. As I kind of looked up into the center of the room, and my room's about sort of 17 foot long, so it would have been about another 8 foot from me that I would be viewing this kind of mist that appeared sort of central into the room, and out from it came this human being looking person that I call Clive, and he just raised his hand like that and just went, and no words were spoken and nothing, no telepathy. And there's a strange man in my room. And the thing is, he was wearing, I know, right? And he was just wearing this woolen tank top, and they were corduroy trousers and this particular shirt and the color of him. And I would have recognized him if I'd seen him in the street. But here's the weird thing. So after my jaw had kind of got back up, I kind of went back to my computer because it was on the edge of my bed, and I put it down. I was going to pull out the plug. And as I was doing that, Clive had faded away. Right by the side of my bed was a very skinny creature. And I don't know whether it was a mantid, but I could see not a claw, what do they call them, or with the crabs, the thingies. It's like I was seeing a long skinny arm. I wasn't fearful, and there was no sound, there was no smell, there was no anything, no other sensory data input going on at all. And I was very surprised. Then that faded away. And I sat up in bed and I thought, what the heck? Now, here's the real kicker. Next day, I'm telling a girlfriend who lives about 300 miles away from me, and I was describing Clive. And I said, I think his gear was like 1960s, the outfit. She said, no, it wasn't. It was 1970s. I went, where do you know? She said, he visited me too. I went, what? She didn't get the UFO bit or the ET bit. She didn't get the mantid. I mean, that's what I'm calling it. My friend said, yeah. And she is very, very good for precise detail, especially of detailing of clothing. And so she described his shirt. I said, yeah, you're right. Because as she was telling me the detail, I said, yeah, as I think about it, that's exactly how his shirt was and his tank top. And I said, it would have been the 70s. I said, wow. And she said, yeah, he just went. She's not at all scaredy cat either. So she said, yeah, he just kind of faded out. I went, oh. So he came to you immediately after he'd been to see me. And I can only imagine that they did that to corroborate, because my friend doesn't believe in anything at all. She ghosts, no problem. She kind of gets that. So, but Clive apparently just turned up, I think, to ensure that I knew that he'd been visiting. So how wild is that?
But she said you was more or less the same time, was it, Joanne?
I can't remember now. She saw him about the same time. How weird, right? I don't know what that means, unless they're just seeing if I'm going to freak out or be a scaredy cat. I wasn't.
And this leads to the question of what is the relationship between perceived UFO intelligence and the other paranormal. In this case, seeing, for example, the deceased, you might call Clive, a deceased person. And so we found out in a research study that this was an extremely common association. People that have seen UFOs and have seen UFO-related type of beings, like, for example, a short gray or a manta type of being, they're also seeing dead people. They're also having out-of-body experiences, et cetera, et cetera. Now, then you could say, okay, it's the ET that's doing this. Is the ET that's manipulating it? Well, let's take a look at another perspective. Is it really the ET that's doing this? Or is the phenomenon a little bit more complicated? Is there a phenomenon behind the ET phenomenon, which is associated with all of the other paranormal? So that's my perspective, and the perspective of all the scientists and academics and the researchers, the non-academic research, people like Barbara Lamb, Kathleen Martin, Leo Sprinkle. They didn't see it as, just purely physical ETs. Maybe they did when they first started researching this phenomenon. But then over the years, they learned so much information. They changed as humans. We all change. Kathleen Martin, for example, she started off writing about abductions, abduction this, abduction that, the Minnie and Barney Hill abduction. Now she recently published a book titled From Alien Abduction to Spiritual Transformation. Kathleen Martin is now all love and light. Whitley Strieber, he's one of the main people that put on the table the whole abduction genre. Yeah. Now you don't hear about abductions now, rarely. but you just don't hear about that. Now, Whitley Strieber, his last 3 books have all been about spirituality.
That's definitely, hitting us on the head, the representation of the physical, because it's like it's an anchor. It helps ground the information. And I think what you're doing and all your colleagues there, it's absolutely fantastic. And I'm really looking forward to getting through your book there and looking at some of the others as well. So
that's just the very, very first book that was published in 2018.
I know.
Since then, our focus have been not just solely on UFOs, but all of the paranormal contact modalities and how that relates to consciousness. And that really is where the kernel of information lies.
So interesting.
It is. I have to say thank you very much, both of you, for being here. And Ray, I know we haven't really scraped the surface. So what we'll do is perhaps in the new year, when you've got a few more of your books done, your documentary is out, maybe we can do a look at that. So that would be absolutely great.
Yesterday, I spent the entire day with the other co-producer and the director. They have 4 hours of finished video in segments, different components. And we need to now trim that 4 hours into 90 minutes. But the content that is there is just unbelievable. No one has ever done anything close to what we're doing in that documentary, because we're, as you said, hitting the nail on the head with all of the paranormal topics, from orbs to out-of-body experience, to near-death experience, to the UFO contact phenomenon, all of that. And we're doing it via the experiencers, as well as the PhD academics that have researched these things in an academic format. So we're putting all of that together, and it's just wonderful testimony from experiencers.
Yeah.
And I think it's also fantastic for the rest of the academic community to have something in their genre, maybe not their field, that is accessible to them on an intellectual level. So fabulous work. Really.
Well, thank you very much, and I look forward to coming back. We hope to publish 4 of these books in January.
Just before everybody goes, just first of all, I'd just like to say thank you to Joanne for letting me co-host here, and Ray, thank you so much for your time. I was so looking forward to hearing from you and chatting to you. I don't know if Joanne mentioned, I'm hoping to start my own podcast in the new year, which is why Joanne has let me sit in here and get a taste for podcasting and co-hosting and all that's involved with it. And thank you so much, Joanne. And maybe no more than with Joanne, you might venture onto my podcast and give us more your information about your documentary, which I can't wait to see, Ray, and your new books. It'll be a delight to have you.
Well, thank you for the future invitation, and email me, and I could give you all of my books, including the ones that are in draft stage, about to be published. I'll send them to you as PDFs so you can review them, because it's important for you to be aware of what the other academics and other fields are studying.
Well, thank you once again, everybody, and thanks for doing this extended interview, Ray, and congratulations on all your transformations. It's gone from every level. So
I was also just recently married.
Oh, really?
Oh, wow.
Congratulations.
Yeah. Wow.
Again.
Yeah, thank you. And this is the happiest period of my life. I'm able to not to work, just concentrate on this love of my life, which is academic research on the paranormal and consciousness, and the new love of my life, the physical love of my life, my wife. Her name is Myra.
Myra, how beautiful. Thank you very much for sharing that.
Your partner's Myra, my partner's Myla.
Oh, very close. Very, very similar.
Myra and Myla, very nice. That's fabulous, guys. Well,
We've a lot in common.
That's absolutely great. Well, I'm really thrilled for you, Ray, and I know you've come a long way, and it's been a heck of a journey for you.
And later on, we could talk about that section of my new book.
Yeah.
I found this ring is an aport. Appeared to me after I spoke to God, and I said, God, you need to help me to find a nice ring. The very next day, this appeared in my mother's box of my grandfather's pole, kept in a tobacco box. Then a few days later, I talked to God. I said, look, God, I'm 68 years old. I need to find a good woman, a good wife that I could die with. I don't want to be lonely all of my life. And then the very next day, I was presented to Myra.
Oh, how beautiful is that? I love these stories.
So I call her the aport ring.
The aport person.
And the aport wife.
Well, I think that is a fabulous note to end on. Nothing like it being love and light. So, as I say, congratulations again. Nobody deserves it more. So, look forward to chatting about all of those in the new year. And we'll definitely do that. We'll get a couple of months in and then I'll connect again. Thank you very much, Howard. I hope it's been interesting for you.
Thank you very much.
All right, guys. I'm going to
All
say
right, Howard.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
over
Bye.
and out, guys.
course.
Enjoy
Thanks, Ray.
yourselves.
Great talking to you, Ray. Thank you.
Bye,
Okay.
everyone.
Take care. Bye. Bye for now.